We are going to be speaking about ovum donation and surrogacy. We have an excellent panel of expert speakers. So now I'd like to turn the teleseminar over to Susan Katzman, who is an attorney that specializes in these contracts.
Thank you, Sarah. And I also am very honored to be part of this panel, and thank you so much for putting it together. Many people do use a relative or a friend as an egg donor or a surrogate, and it is just as important to have the contract in place, outlining all of the terms, the rights and responsibilities of all the parties. And many times when somebody hears that they have to have the contract, they're rather surprised. Their doctor says you need to have this contract. But in California, the law is that if you have this contract in place and it's clear and all of the parties have described their intent, then the courts have upheld that kind of contract. And really, the law is not that old. For sperm donors, we have it a statutory law, California Family Law Code section. So if a man donates his sperm, the law states what whose father will be. For egg donors and surrogacy, it's really case law, and we go back to 1993 is the first case, Johnson versus Calvert, and in that case there was a contest between the surrogate and the intended mother, and the court upheld the contract. So they had a very clear contract that stated the intent, and that's the language the courts are looking for. Then a stronger case in 1998, in re marriage of Buzanka. In that case, the couple used an egg donor, sperm donor, and a surrogate. And when the surrogate was pregnant, the couple got divorced. The father intended father did not want to pay child support and said that he was not the father and wanted to get out of the contract. It wasn't his sperm, his wife wasn't giving birth. It wasn't his wife's egg. And again, the court looked to the contract, and it was very clear that the surrogate only got pregnant for the intended parents to have a child, and they upheld that contract. And so in California, we are in a good position. So what the contract has to be very detailed, and some people try and get one online, and maybe there's a template. You really need an experienced attorney to draft your contract. And in the case of friends or relatives, very often they are not paid. An egg donor is paid around $5,000 to $7,000 for first time donating eggs. And when a friend or relative does that and they don't get paid, that's really a beautiful thing for them to do, for someone to have a child. But there are still costs involved. Gas is expensive, and they have to drive to the doctor and purchase maybe some pain medication, something. And so you really want all of that in the contract, so the donor doesn't feel uncomfortable going to ask the intended parents. And a surrogate also, there are of course more expenses with a surrogate. Even if she's not getting paid, a surrogate generally gets paid around in the area of $20,000 to $25,000 to act as a gestational carrier. And even if they're not getting paid that amount, there are still expenses that everything has to be outlined in the contract. Maternity clothes, if she has doctor's appointments, if she needs child care, if she has to be on bed rest and has to be out of work and can't take care of her, any housekeeping, then the surrogate, you want that in the contract, all of those details outlined in the contract. Some other areas in the contract. One area of concern that must be detailed is what to do with any remaining embryos. So in the case of an egg donor where the donor is taking medication to produce a lot of eggs, normally the woman produces 1 egg a month, and maybe Dr. Benazir could add more medical information, but the medication that the donor takes is to produce a lot of eggs, and I've had donors produce 10, 20, actually up to 40 eggs. And then not all of these eggs are going to get fertilized, and then maybe not all of them will be good quality. But in any event, usually or very often there are embryos that are not, that will be remaining once the person or couple has completed their family. And the fee to keep these embryos frozen is approximately $500 a year. So once the person or the couple decides they've completed the family, they do not want to continue paying the $500 a year. And the question is, what can they do with those embryos? And that needs to be in the contract, because the doctor cannot transfer genetic material from one person to another without everybody's written consent. So the options are to donate the remaining embryos to someone else to have a child, to donate them for medical research, to terminate them, or keep them cryopreserved for your own use. And I actually also put in my contract that it could be used for medical reasons should the scientific technology, should we ever have the scientific technology that you can use it for your own child, if, you know, for medical reasons, if your child needs the DNA for some reason. So sometimes a donor has a particular belief or interest in one of those. Either they definitely want their genetic material to be donated to someone, or they definitely want it not to be donated to anyone else, or they definitely don't want it to be used for medical research or terminated. If there's some strong feeling, then that has to be in the contract. All parties have to agree, and that has to be in the contract. So that is something to think about. Something else that is included in the contract is any future contact. Especially if it's an anonymous egg donor. Will you have any future contact? Perhaps the child will ask questions and will want future contact. So there has to be some discussion of that and agreed on that. Usually we put in something in the contract for medical purposes. So should your child have a medical condition that you would like more information from the egg donor, then the contract allows that there can be contact for that. But even still, it would be anonymous contact, either through the doctor's office or through a third-party registry. There are very few of these registries where you could register and contact the donor anonymously. So you have that option. Also, in the contract would be confidentiality. If you know the donor, who is going to have the right to disclose any information about the egg donation procedure? Is it going to be is it going to be completely anonymous? Usually, intended parents want total control over disclosing any information to the child. Also in the contract is what Dr. Benazir explained about the medical evaluation, that the contract will state everybody agrees to undergo whatever medical evaluations are required. These, of course, will include HIV testing and any communicable illnesses. Everyone has to make sure that, the tests have to be done to clear everyone. There are medical risks, and those must be explained by a medical professional, not by the attorney or or your friend or online. Usually an egg donor also it will be probably discussed by Carla Burnett, the psychological evaluation. That's also very important. Sometimes when it's a friend or family member that psychological evaluations are waived, but otherwise really everyone has to understand that you don't know exactly how you'll feel knowing that your genetic material is out there or raising a child with an egg donor. So that's also very important, and the contract will cover that. There usually is a time limit for the contract because the intended parents, everyone really wants to get the IVF procedure going and completed, and the donor does not want to be obligated to be available for a very extended time. So usually we have these contracts terminate between 3 to 6 months. There's also a question, where can you find an egg donor? And I have spoken with intended parents or egg donors that actually I've had some egg donors or surrogates found on Craigslist, believe it or not, or you can go to an agency, of course, and they're very helpful, and that does add an added expense. And some doctors have an egg donor bank in the doctor's office. So there are several options where you can find your egg donor. Something else, another additional expense for the intended parents is a medical insurance policy for the egg donor as well as the surrogate. For the surrogate, insurance is very tricky and technical, so you want to make sure that is all in place. And there is a medical insurance policy for the egg donor to cover complications. Sometimes there are complications, and hospitalization can be very expensive, or trips to the doctor can be expensive. So the premium on this medical insurance policy is approximately $400, and that would cover complications, I believe, up to about $250,000. So that's important to make sure that that's in place, and your doctor or agency or attorney can help you with that. You want to make sure you go over the entire contract. I know it's a lot to read and to understand, and when you're in this process, it could be very overwhelming. You need to take notes after speaking to so many people and keeping track of all the expenses and who you've spoken to, and it could be overwhelming, as Carla probably will go into. So if something is not in your contract, then it's not part of the contract, and that's why you need to go over it carefully with your attorney. Some people assume things, or they've read it online, or they're just not paying attention. So it's really important to go over the whole contract. So I think I will stop here and leave time for questions.
Thank you so much for talking about the legal aspect of things. Yeah, so thank you so much for talking about that.